Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome. Today's topic is Tom Zuck's U.S. Civil War Diary, 1862, Part 1. Tom Zuck was my great-great-grandfather, my father's mother's father's father's father. And I started my family history work when I typed up his Civil War Diary and started a publication called the Zuck Family Memories Collection. And today's content is based on ZFMC number 1, which I published for family members on August 10th, 1987, actually 4 years before my dear wife Alice and I got married in Manila, Philippines. September 1, 1862. Left Camp Delaware at 10 o'clock today for Camp Dick Robeson, seeing nothing of importance between Delaware and Columbus. Arrived at Columbus about 12:30 and remained till 1 o'clock. After leaving Columbus, passed through splendid country, which extended to Xenia, where we arrived between 2 and 3. Did not remain in Xenia, Ohio long, but long enough to save a part of a carload of cotton that stood on the side track with several other cars loaded with the same material. The cotton had taken fire from a spark from the locomotive. After leaving Xenia, the country becomes more hilly, but still some splendid farms skirt the railroad. Arrived in Cincinnati about 5:30 o'clock and were ordered to form on the street, after which we were paraded through the principal streets of the city, and then marched to the foot of Base Street and put on the ferry boat for Covington, Kentucky. At about 1 p.m., placed my feet for the first time on the soil made famous by the exploits of Daniel Boone and his compatriots. Here I became exhausted and dropped out of the ranks and was put in charge of the assistant surgeon, Sullivan, who put us into a wagon to be taken up into the city. We were unloaded in the street and remained there for about an hour, and then were provided with a splendid supper by the ladies of Covington, God bless them. Although I did not feel in condition to eat much, yet it looked to me as if the people of this state, the loyal ones at least, appreciated the sacrifices we were making in leaving our own quiet homes to join them in putting down an insolent foe that is determined to destroy the peace of here. We, the sick, remained in the hall where we received our supper about 9 o'clock, when the ladies kindly volunteered to take us to their own houses and care for us until other quarters could be prepared for us. I, with several others, were taken to the house of a Mrs. Golden and allowed to sleep on the floor of her parlor, there being no beds, but we had plenty of bed clothing furnished us. Here we bunked in as comfortably as you please, and rested till about 4 in the morning, when the alarm bell was rung and the drum beat the call to arms. And now everybody was excited, running hither and thither, inquiring what is the matter, but nobody knows, until one of the boarders comes in and says that Morgan has taken Lexington and is within 10 miles of Covington with 20 or 30,000 troops. But I give no credences to the latter part of this report. But there is one thing certain. Morgan has possession of the railroad between here and Lexington, and we either have to clear him out or remain here till he is cleared out. This morning they are recruiting every able-bodied man in Covington. The ferry is stopped between here and Cincinnati, and all the business is stopped in this city except military business. 9 o'clock today we were ordered to get into the omnibus, myself and several others that were unfit for duty, and be taken to the Covington Hospital. Here we found everything in splendid order. This has got to be one of the best hospitals in the country. I was put into a room with 3 others of the 96th, one of whom is our orderly, Sergeant Sesquet in Hamilton's company, and I find him a very fine sort of fellow. We have excellent quarters here. Each one has a single cottage bedstead and bed to himself. There's quite a lot of the boys from the 96th Ohio here today. September 3, 1862. Last night was rather a sleepless night to some of us, as we were woke up about 12 o'clock by the alarm that the rebels had driven in our pickets and were preparing for an immediate attack upon the place. It was reported that they were about 20,000 strong. We were considerably excited, but not much scared. You know Buckeyes never get scared. So I got up and sat by the window and knocked about generally till daybreak. Today the report of last night turns out considerable of an exaggeration. The driving in of our pickets was from the carelessness of some U.S. cavalry that were out and got mixed up with the pickets, whereupon they, the picket, found their pieces and fled to the inside lines and gave the report that the rebels were upon us in full force. Things are quiet in the three cities this afternoon, again with the exception of a few military movements as the streets are busy in perfecting the military organizations, companies of citizens from Cincinnati and troops from the interior of Ohio are constantly moving across the Ohio River at the upper ferry. They are sent to work upon the entrenchments and to occupy them. 500 Negroes were gathered in Cincinnati and sent to work and to relieve these soldiers. At 6 o'clock p.m., all appears to be quiet. A lot of rebel cavalry burned a trail within 15 miles of Covington today on the Covington and Lexington Pike Railroad. Men are constantly coming into town today from Lexington, Cincinnati, and Paris, some on horseback and some by railroad. September 4th, 1862. Cincinnati looks deserted. I can see nothing going on in the city from our window and landing that are all in full view from here, present, a view that is peaceful to look upon. They are deserted from one end to the other, with the exception of the one at the foot of Vine Street. There the ferry boats are hourly conveying troops across the river into Covington. An artillery company will quarter in the hospital yard tonight, if the surgeon in charge will permit it. They have a splendid battery of 12-pounders. September 5, 1862. I don't feel so well this morning as I have for a day or two back. The company of artillery appeared boisterous last evening, and it became necessary to place a guard at the doors, and poor I was detailed on the first and third watch, so from this cause I got very little sleep. 6 o'clock p.m. I sit down to complete my journal for the day. I have just been in to see a man in the forward part of our ward who has been for some days delirious with fever, but is now fast approaching that quote from which no traveler returns. And I have been led to inquire with pity, Great God, how long wilt thou permit this state of things to continue? Now this poor man is here among total strangers, they not even knowing where he is from or who are his friends. He belongs to some one of the men's regiments, but his officers don't either know of his condition or else they don't care. I have witnessed more suffering and human misery within the last 4 days than in all the preceding portion of my life. And my constant prayer is, quote, if I am permitted to return home in the event of peace, that I will try and feel satisfied and happy and thankful that our country is no longer cursed with war and that untold misery and death are so strangely commingled with the more vulgar scenes of a soldier's life no longer. There is a force of 1,600 cavalry quartered just in the rear of this hospital. They are Kentuckians. There is also a large lot of mules quartered in the yards about the hospital. They belong to the train that was burned a day or two back near this place. September 6, 1862. Nothing of much important has transpired today. It is reported this evening that General Kirby Smith is rapidly advancing on this place with 8 brigades. It is also stated that our pickets are driven in, but it is a mistake. They have finished a pontoon bridge over the Ohio at the foot of Vine Street today. September 7th, 1862. We are looking every hour for an attack from General Smith. There is an ominous silence reigning over the community. I found out for the first time that my father, Filler, was in Cincinnati. He has been there almost a week, and I went down to the pontoon bridge about 5 p.m. and seen him. He was performing guard duty there. He's talking about his wife's father. Tonight, everything indicates a mess before morning. The cavalry are putting out in all directions. September 8th, 1862. The cavalry have nearly all returned this morning. Nothing of importance has transpired today. Father came to the hospital to see me today. He says he brought a letter for me and put it into the post office. I have tried everywhere to get it, but did not succeed. I am about half mad about it and nearly sick. September 9, 1862. Today our regiment left Covington for the scene of trouble. I got uptown to see the boys off. It is reported that the rebels are rapidly advancing, and this time there is no doubt of it. Our boys will soon smell gunpowder. They appear to be ready for any emergency. The cavalry are constantly scouring the country, and as constantly bringing in reports of the nearness of the enemy. This evening things look considerably warish. We go to bed expecting to be roused before morning by the boom of artillery. September 10, 1862. Last night passed away and no attack from the enemy. I was up often during the night, but there was painful silence prevailing. This morning, there's a heavy guard stationed all around the hospital limits. No one is allowed to either pass from the surgeon in charge. I think there is something in the wind of importance. In all probability, we are to be removed from this place to one of greater security. 1 o'clock p.m. I have just been upstairs and have had a little chat with the rebels that are here with us. They seem to be sensible men and appreciate the care and attention that is bestowed upon them by those in charge. One of them told me that when he was put aboard of the boat to be sent to Covington, if he could have had his choice, he would rather have had his head blowed off than to come, as he had been taught to believe that we treated prisoners with savage cruelty. But he says now that he will remember this place with the kindliest feelings as long as he lives. Orderly Maines just informed me that they are skirmishing within 5 miles of town. A lieutenant have just arrived and brought the intelligence. Some of our pickets are badly wounded. One has arrived at the hospital, shot through the hand. September 11th, 1862. This day has passed off very quietly in town. We had a heavy shower of rain today. The rebels have advanced to within light of our lines, and a few skirmishes among the pickets is the consequence. Our loss is 3 or 4 killed so far. There was a wounded cavalryman brought to the hospital this evening. He had his horse shot under him and received a wound in the knee. September 12th. It is currently reported today that the rebels are drawing off and making preparations for a grand skedaddle. The big scare that the circuitous have been getting on is likely to evaporate into thin air. We of the hospital are more closely guarded today. However, there is a guard stationed in every hall in the house, and we are obliged to give a reason for every time we leave our rooms. There was another man died in the front of this ward yesterday. His disease was fever. September 13th. This morning the cavalry are all off toward Lexington. General Smith is gone for certain, and our boys are after him. He appears to be making as hasty a retreat as circumstances will allow. The Cincinnati forces crossed the river tonight toward Cincinnati, with the thunder of cannon and the shouts of spectators. They are to have a grand reception over there this evening. They feel as if they had thrashed the whole CSA out of their boots. Sunday, September 14th. This morning comes in as calm and beautiful as if no such thing as war and bloodshed was known in the land. It is the first day that has looked to me like the Sabbath since I left home. Would to God that the day might be observed in every part of our war-distracted country as it should be. Oh, if any man could only appreciate the wonderful goodness and manifold blessing of our kind, beneficent Creator, we should not be so willing to rush upon destruction in the 10,000 ways that it is presented to us. But so it is, and we have no alternative but to beg the Almighty in His infinite power to put a stop to the wicked designs of His ungrateful creatures. 10 o'clock a.m. On the riverbank enjoying the sights of passing gunboats and the throng of churchgoers that are passing and repassing on the ferry. Today my friend and roommate, Maines, left for the regiment, amid the regrets of all who had become acquainted with him. He is indeed a fine fellow, and I don't wonder that his company thinks so highly of him. Sunday night. Attended church at the Main Street M.E. Chapel. Heard a good practical sermon from the words, "Search the Scriptures." This is the first time I have been inside of church since I left home. May I have many such opportunities. September 15th. This morning I began to feel strongly in the humor for going to the regiment. After talking with Lieutenant Chandler, I have come to the conclusion that I will go. We applied to Dr. Thomas for a discharge and were successful. 10 o'clock a.m. Reported to the DM's detachment for transportation, which we did not get until about 4 o'clock p.m., when we jumped into an ambulance and were soon on our way to camp. After leaving Newport, we began to detect evidences that there had been some preparations made for the reception of the troops. All along the road from town to camp, wherever there is a tree within reach of the pike, it is almost cut off, so that it would take but a few more blows to place it across the road. And across the pike here is considerable of an obstruction, as the road winds round among the hills, and there is hundreds of places where a tree across the road would make it perfectly unpassable for artillery or teams of army. I like the looks of the country much better out in this direction than I do north of Cincinnati. We arrived here about sundown and found our boys pleasantly encamped on a hill within stone's throw of the pike. I believe I will like it out here. September 16th. In camp 5 miles below Cincinnati. I feel improved this morning, although still unfit for duty. I expect to be able to go on duty by tomorrow. I like the situation of our camp very well. We are one of the advanced regiments if the rebels make an attack. We will get the first taste of their mettle. There's a camp of regulars within a stone's throw of us to the northeast. We are about 1 mile from the Ohio River, where we have to go for water. There was one of the 44th CVI boys found drowned in the Ohio near our camp this morning, and our colonel had to detail a squad to go and get the body. Our regiment has just been ordered out for every purpose. I don't know what they have gone down the pike taking nothing but their guns and ammunition. 6 o'clock. The regiment has returned. All is quiet in camp. Peters of the 121st came to see our boys today. The boys were all very glad to see him and to learn that the 121st were so near to us. They are in Cincinnati. September 17th. I am trying to perform duty today, but it is awful hard work for me as I find myself very weak yet. We expect to get our tents today. At least they are promised to us. I received 2 letters yesterday, one from Anna and one from home, from Jane. Today I answered Anna's. I went to the orderly today and drew the rest of my accoutrements, so now I am fully equipped. September 17th. I have nothing of much importance to record today. The regiment is in good condition and fine spirits. Our captain is unwell today and is compelled to stay in his tent. We received a portion of our tents today, of which our company received 3, so that we will have to sleep 32 in one tent if we can all get in. They are the bell tent and are about 13 feet in diameter on the ground with a single high pole, and that in the center, around which we have to stack our arms and accoutrements so as to preserve them from the damp. September 18th. Today things begin to assume a shape that looks more soldier-like. Our tents are being set in line, and the old excuses for shelter that were merely branches stuck upon rails are being torn down and carried away. I have been on duty all day and feel very well. Company D is beginning to come out. The captain says we stand well in the opinion of the regimented officers. Tomorrow morning, we, the Company D, have to go on picket duty. The boys are all much elated at the idea. September 19th, 1862. This morning we are all off for the picket station. It is quite a treat for the boys to get outside of the guard lines once more. We are traveling in a southeasterly direction. Our first picket guard was dropped about three-quarter miles from camp. The second about a half-mile farther, while we, the remaining, continued to the third and last station, which is about 2.5 miles from the camp of the 96th, at what they call the Long Bridge. Here we prepared to station a guard at the forward end of the bridge, on which I was lucky enough to be detailed, and one on the rear end. Also one on a diverging road about 1/8 of a mile from station number 1. We found an abundance of every kind of eatables within short distance of the stations. Our boys pay for all that we get, and that is all that the natives ask. I don't as yet know of a single instance in which any of the 96th have disturbed anyone's property without paying abundantly for it. September 20th. This morning, after a first-rate breakfast on chicken and sweet potatoes, we packed our knapsacks and turned toward camp again with many regrets that we could not always be on picket duty. Things in camp still continue the same this morning. 9 o'clock. I and a fellow by the name of Kendall, with 2 from each company, have just been detailed for picket duty tonight. We don't know where we are going or what we are going to do. September 21. Today the inspection of arms, equipments, and quarters came off, and I believe not one man from the regiment was sent to the sergeant for uncleanliness. We had a sermon on the parade ground today which was attentively listened to by a large and appreciative audience of soldiers. And in the afternoon there was a prayer meeting and experience meetings held on the campground, which for earnestness and sincerity I have never seen excelled. There is indeed a band of Christian soldiers connected with the regiment. This Sunday evening the boys of Company D, or those that felt inclined, together with some from other companies, gathered around Captain Coulter's tent and sang this lovely hymn, Sweet Hour of Prayer, which had the effect of bringing that gentleness out, inviting us in where he offered up one of those prayers which only a man that is in earnest can make, for the blessings of God. The song, the singers, and the chorus of night, the world over, often leaving Coulter's tent, we visited several other officers' tents and were earnestly exhorted to continue in the good way to which we seemed inclined. September 22. This morning there is a heavy detail for the different guard duties made from each company. I am beginning to lose all interest in the drill, as the boys don't seem to come whether they learn anything or not. Last night the boys had a prayer meeting on the parade ground which was largely attended. There seems to be an increase in the interest taken in religious matters. Oh, that it would continue to increase until the whole regiment were brought to a feeling sense of their obligations to God as well as to their country. God grant it. And then we will truly be prepared to fight for the right. September 23. Today has passed away as usual, with the exception of a few changes in the companies of non-commissioned officers. Some had some of their orderlies reduced, while ours had 3 corporals reduced to the ranks, and among those who were raised to the offices was myself for 6th corporal. I consider it a mark of respect from the officers, but it is not by any means a desirable position, as the labors of a corporal are more than those of a private, and the pay the same. This evening we had another prayer meeting in camp, which was conducted with the usual zeal and earnestness. My wish is that it may continue as commenced. We changed our camp today about 3/4 of a mile to the rear of our old camp. We have a better parade ground here than we had on the other camp, but a miserable piece of ground to pitch our tents on, as it is right in a cornfield, and the cornfield was in a sort of ravine. September 24th. We received the most of the balance of our tents today. We now have 8 tents to the company and 2 officers' tents. Our company has been remiss. It is now divided into 4 messes, and each mess is allotted 2 tents. I am put in charge of one of the tents of mess, now 4, wherein there is 10 men, all from Marion and vicinity. We have not drilled much today. Our time has been taken up in cleaning up our quarters. We were inspected by a U.S. officer today. The thing passed off satisfactory. September 25th. Today things are in about the same condition as they have been ever since we moved. We have been drilling preparatory to the ground review that is to come off tomorrow at Newport. It is expected there will be quite a large body of troops there for that purpose. September 27th. I am acting today for the first time as Corporal of the Guard. The duties of corporal are not so heavy as I at first anticipated. The regiment went to Newport today at 10 o'clock, leaving no one behind but the regimental guard and a few cooks to each company. Also those that were, and the clerks in the staff officers' tents, among which is my old friend G.R. Durfel in the adjutant's quarters, at whose desk I am writing my journal for today. It is now about 3 o'clock, and we can hear the occasional boom of artillery from the city that attended the army from here for the review. There is no officers left in our company of about 20 men but myself, and I am therefore in command of the regiment remnant. There is but one commissioned officer left in the camp, and that was a case of necessity as officer of the guard. The boys have returned, and pronounced all reviews a grand bore, as it is all work for the men and none for the officers of the brigade and division. I am getting along with my duties as corporal of the guard very well. September 28th. Sunday in camp is generally observed in this vicinity, but the drill being all omitted but dress parade. At parade this evening, the man from Company A, who was caught napping while on picket some 2 or 3 weeks ago, was sentenced, in presence of the whole regiment, because of a great deal easier than do generally that are convicted for such offense. His sentence was 20 days' work with ball and chain to his leg, and afterwards 10 days' solitary confinement on bread and water. He is a man of family and resides in Mount Vernon. September 29th. Today the regular routine of camp duties has not been disturbed by any outward circumstance. We got up in the morning and went through with our duties, eat our meals, and at night stretched ourselves on the ground like a soldier has to, half hog and half human. September 30th. Today has passed and not much has happened to make interesting. The usual monotonous routine of camp duties. Corporal Vance has again taken up his abode inside the regimental guard lines of the 96th. He has for some time been quartering in a farmhouse outside the lines. The regiment went out today to have a show fight. They fire regularly in all different ways by company, division, or regiment. I begin to think that the 96th Ohio will, if even brought into action, give a good account of herself. October 1. Today I do not feel as well as usual. I guess I am going to have a bilious attack. I have just been to the surgeon headquarters, and they gave me 3 calomel powders to take. I am also excused from duty. 8 o'clock p.m. The sergeant has just made us draw ammunition enough to fill our cartridge boats. He says we are to move somewhere but don't know where or how far. The notion prevailing is that we are going to leave Kentucky. We are required to draw the balance of our clothing, that is all that have not drawn a full supply. October 2. Things today move along in their usual monotonous manner. We are sinking in a vat of inactivity, and lack of employment can make us. October 3. This morning there is a heavy detail made from each of the companies for fatigue duty. Somewhere in this region I have been on the sick list for 2 days past. I guess I am considerably bilious, but I think I will be able to report for duty by tomorrow. The boys who went to our fatigue duty today, heavy, returned this evening. They have been at work on some rifle pillets near Newport. Today, Eleonora Volflecht visited Camp Bates. She seemed to think that she was creating quite a sensation, and perhaps she was, but my opinion is that camp is no place for a woman. Our Captain Dwyer has been today placed upon General Smith's staff. Whether it is permanent or only temporary, I cannot as yet tell. October 4. This morning I concluded not to report to the surgeon and try and do duty. We have not drilled any today. The forenoon has been wet and showery with the prospect of 3 or 4 days wet weather. 8 o'clock p.m. We have done nothing today but come out on dress parade on account of the weather. Sunday, October 5th breaks in as usual with the roll call for us, although Sunday is usually observed in all U.S. camps. After our usual Sunday morning inspection, we were commanded to take down our tents and spread them on the ground to air them. It is very inconvenient for me as the sun is very hot and we have no other shade inside of the guard lines. October 6th. Rumors are rife in camp this morning that we are to move from this camp soon. It is also asserted by some of the prominent officers that they have agreed not to budge from our present position until government gives something in the place of the miserable excuses for quarters that we are now supplied with. If we should ever be brought under fire and had nothing better to defend ourselves with, I think our opponents would have very little trouble in taking our top knots. October 7th. Up at 5 o'clock and preparing for the march. All the boys are in a state of excitement. I have the good luck to be on guard as corporal of 2nd Relief. 7 o'clock a.m. Off for somewhere we don't yet know where. We who are on guard are in the rear of the regiment, and that gives the corporal a pretty good chance to get a little easier times than if he were in the ranks. We have halted in the road in front of our camp for a little time. We are off again for Covington, I suppose from the direction we have taken. 9 o'clock. Halted in front of the general's headquarters to await orders, I presume. The 23rd Regiment is with us, and I don't know but we will gather the whole brigade before we get to Covington. After halting here for about 1 hour, I find we are waiting for the 83rd OBI that is encamped just out of sight of the pike. On we go again, but what? Another halt? It's only the guard. Well, here we halted and are ordered to remain until the army and trains have passed us, and then to fall into the rear. We have been here half an hour and the wagon trains have all passed yet. One would not think that one brigade would require so much means for transporting its goods. 4 o'clock p.m. 2 miles south of Covington on the Lexington Pike. This far has been a very tiresome march for us boys. We have been on the road since 7 o'clock a.m. and have up to this time traveled over about 8 miles carrying all of our accoutrements consisting of gun, cartridge bot containing 40 rounds of ammunition, knapsacks, overcoat, canteen filled with water, each holding about 3 pints, making in all about 60 pounds. 5 o'clock p.m. Our boys are dropping out of the ranks every now and then. Blouses and other fixings are beginning to get plenty along the roadside. We are now about 4 miles from Covington. There is some nice sulfur springs here. It is visited by all the fashionable folks of Cincinnati and Covington. 7 o'clock p.m. We have just arrived at the camp, jaded and weary, but will have to go upon guard immediately. It is hard, but we have to submit. We have enlisted to serve Uncle Samuel and will have to do things as arranged then for us to do. Today we have marched about 12 miles. October 9th. Came off guard this morning almost used up. I could not get my relief off in time to fall in with the regiment, so we had to fall in with the wagon train. The boys were all ordered to put their knapsacks aboard the wagons, which they did. I met Surgeon Henderson, who not only ordered me to put my knapsack on the wagon, but to tuck myself into the ambulance or wagon if I could get a chance, which advice I followed willingly. I therefore soon found myself leisurely riding along in the rear of 6 good stout mules. The march today has been a hard one for the boys, as the latter part of the road has been very uneven. We got into camp about 8 o'clock, and we that were on the wagons had to march the last mile. Made 10 miles today. October 10th. Again we are on the march. We started about 4 o'clock this morning and have marched very steadily up to 10 o'clock a.m. when we encamped about 8 miles from last night's camping ground. We would not have stopped here if the boys had not run out of eatables. We are now waiting for the train. Some of the boys of this brigade have taken the commissary duty into their own hands by shooting hogs, turkeys, geese, chicken, and anything they can lay their hands on and preparing it to eat. This brigade is composed of 5 regiments of infantry, 1 battery, and quite a lot of cavalry. I don't yet know how many. We expected to move this afternoon, but have now been ordered to pitch our tents and remain till 3 o'clock tomorrow morning. So agreeable to order our tents are pitched, and we are once more snugly housed from the inclemency of the weather, and have our tents well filled with straw, of which we have an abundant supply in the immediate vicinity of the camp. October 11th, 3 o'clock a.m. We are once more packed up and in line, ready for another march. At 4 o'clock we got underway and moved off in the direction of Lexington. We found the roads excellent, and the brigade moved along in fine spirits. The country begins to assume a much better appearance as we advanced into the interior and off from the valley of the Ohio. There are less hills and consequently a much better grazing country. We now begin to see the effect of the late rebel raid into the section of Kentucky, but so far it was comparatively of little importance. We arrived at a village by the name of Falmouth about 12 o'clock. At this point, the rebels have destroyed the bridge on the Lexington Railroad over the South. Here we found a beautiful camping and parade ground and will probably remain here for a day or so, as the railroad this far is now in running condition, so that we can receive our supplies direct from Cincinnati. We have 5 regiments of infantry, a full brigade, 1 of cavalry, and 2 batteries of artillery encamped on the plain immediately north of the town. The regiments with us are the 23rd Wisconsin, the 83rd Ohio, 85th Indiana, and 118 Ohio. The 10th Kentucky Cavalry, the artillery. I have not yet learned where they do hail from. There is altogether about 8,000 troops here, and 1 regiment repairing the railroad between here and Covington, the 45th Ohio. We expect it here soon. I am again detailed today on regimental guard, and it does not seem altogether that the same corporal should be detailed twice the same week, and upon the march at that, but we have to submit, for we enlisted with the understanding that we were to obey orders. We made 12 miles today. October 12th. Sunday once more comes upon us, but here it does not seem much like Sunday. We have run pretty short of supplies, and have pretty hard work to get enough to keep off the monster hunger. At 3 o'clock p.m. we drew 1 day's more provisions. We still have plenty of meat, as our army is impressing cattle, but if the railroad is not soon put in running order, we will want for breadstuffs. It is reported today that John Hood of Marion, who has been following the brigade since we left Camp Bates, has superseded our quartermaster, and I hope it may be so, for I think that department might be placed in better hands. There is quite a little stir in our regiment today from the fact that some of our company officers had been put under arrest for violating one of the colonel's orders. The order was that no one could pass the guard lines without they had a sergeant or corporal accompanying them, and that only for the purpose of procuring wood or water. So these officers, among whom was our first lieutenant, now acting captain, took it into their hands that they would get a corporal and pass the lines to get a sight at some of the other regiments that were then on drill, with the avowed purpose of obtaining wood. But the fact coming to the colonel's ears resulted in the aforesaid arrest, and also in the reducing of the corporal that undertook the job. Tonight we are in a very comfortable shape, and I anticipate a good night's rest. I listened today for the first time to our chaplain preach. He appears to be a very fine preacher and made a good impression. October 13th. Since writing yesterday's journal, I have had a little chance to learn some of the history of this place, Falmouth, Kentucky. It is now about 2 weeks since a skirmish between the Home Guards and a lot of Secesh that were encamped on the very ground we now occupy. It appears that the rebels were intending to make this a permanent point of operations, and with that view they had started to build some barracks in close proximity to a certain building on the outskirts of the village. But the Home Guards determined that they should do no such thing and prevent it. They immediately took possession of the seminary building and commenced to fire on the workmen engaged in the barracks, and kept it up so briskly that they, the Secesh, were compelled to stop and make good their retreat after having lost 6 killed and 12 wounded. In their retreat, they burned the railroad bridge, which exasperated the home guards so much that they threw 2 of the dead rebels into the burning structure. Some of the boys have picked up some of the Secesh bones that were not entirely consumed. October 14th. Times in camp today begin to assume their old appearances. We are well fixed again and satisfied. All the drawback we now have is regard to the supplies, of which we have but a very limited quantity on hand. So it has become absolutely necessary to cut in upon our eatables until we are reduced to nearly half rations. October 15th. This morning we are off on a picketing frolic. Notwithstanding the danger attending such service in this section of the country, the boys are exultant and boisterous in anticipation of a good time when we get into the country. 6:00 p.m. We have once more had all we wanted to eat. In fact, some of the boys are gorging themselves extensively. Here we can get corn dodgers, biscuits, and rice. All we want on reasonable terms. The boys are investing largely. The man, or rather family, from whom they buy are owners of slaves, and the kitchen department of their hewed log residence is presided over by a very black negress. The proprietor of the farm pretends to be a very good Union man as well as a consistent Christian of the Presbyterian persuasion. But one of his boys, niggers, tells us that he don't know as, quote, "Massa is a curse fella, guess he's a good Union man, but don't know." This Negro appears to be rather intelligent and would like to have his liberty, but is too conscientious to obtain it in any other way but with his master's consent. October 16th. This morning we returned to camp and found things moving in the usual style. We are now once more settled down into the regular old duties of camp life, but how long it will continue, so we cannot tell. Today the first train of cars that have moved over the railroad between here and Cincinnati since Kirby Smith's raid came to Falmouth. It was loaded chiefly with supplies for the Army. So we are now expecting a forward movement every hour. In fact, 2 of the regiments of this division are ordered to be off tomorrow morning. October 17th. Things about camp this morning give me no inducements to make my journal of any interest today. We are now settled down into the old routine of camp duties. Things come and go in their old monotonous style. 12:00 p.m. This afternoon I am detailed to assist in the construction of the railroad bridge. I found it pretty hard work. The bridge is only being built temporarily. October 18th. Today the rumor is rife throughout camp that we are to move tomorrow, but as yet we have not been ordered to make any preparations. 6:00 p.m. We have been furnished with half rations for 2 days, and the boys begin to think they are going sure enough, but still we have no positive orders to that effect. The next move is to be to Cincinnati on the same railroad on which Falmouth is. We will have to make a march of 32 miles through the country to reach that point. October 19th, Sunday. This morning we are up and off for Cincinnati. We were aroused at 12 o'clock last night for the purpose of cooking rations and making preparations for the march at 5 o'clock. We were all ready to start but did not get off until 8 o'clock. We passed out of Falmouth on the Lexington Pike, but such roads as we passed over is enough to kill the best set of trains that ever follow an army. It runs over the hills and ridges in the bottoms of gorges and ravines. To us Ohio boys, this is a new kind of road entirely. In some places the road passes through ravines where the bottom is solid limestone extending from 200 yards to 1 mile to 1.5 miles and straight and smooth, and then it becomes broken and is one continued step after another, down, 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 until it seems enough to break the bones in one's body. The country still becomes better as we advance toward Lexington, but still we are not out of the hills. We passed some fine-looking farms, well fenced and in fine condition, owing to the great amount of limestone in this region. It is used extensively for the purpose of making fences. Yet lumber is plenty and very good too. The stone fences are a new thing to me. They are nicely built and kept up in fine order. We made a march of 25 miles, arriving in camp just south of Cincinnati about 7 o'clock p.m., but for most of the boys it was a pretty hard old march. Our Company D only brought 24 men into camp with the regiment, but the rest have all straggled into camp sometime or other during the night. As fast as the boys arrive, they drop immediately where they are ordered to halt, and nothing short of a bayonet will induce them to move. Yesterday, some 200 Federal cavalry were made prisoners by the Rebs between here and Lexington, but were immediately paroled. I have a notion that we will soon have a chance to get a sight at the elephant, as he is making some pretty plain tracks in this country. October 20. This morning the boys are awfully stiff and tired. To march is entirely out of the question for the present. I never have seen any men so generally used up as the men of the 96th are today. But there is one thing that somewhat allays the physical suffering of the boys, and that is the consciousness that we will have one good day's rest. That is one day free from all the usual duties of camp life. There has been 38 Secesh prisoners brought into camp today. They were taken by the pickets of the 83rd Ohio. October 21. Today we calculate upon another day's rest, but notwithstanding we are ordered to move immediately. Our tents were struck and everything in readiness to start when the order to move was countermanded. Then up went the tents, and the boys are much gratified with the prospect of another day's rest. The reason we did not move is now sensibly explained to me, as I am ordered to take command of 200 men and proceed immediately to the railroad bridge near this place that was burned a short time since, and put it in order so that the trains can pass over it for the purpose of conveying provisions to this brigade. I find it considerable of a task to boss so large a force, and see that things are all at hand and provided for the work besides. We have very poor tools, and but half enough at that. I have detailed I.B. Etherton and several others to help me in keeping the men at work, but it is almost an impossible job to keep so many men at work. October 22. This morning we are off for the bridge with but half of the men that we had yesterday, and I find it much easier to get along with them than as many as we had yesterday. 3 o'clock. I'm once more in camp, having got done at the bridge, and afterward coming to town and running round a little to get a view of the town. I begin to think this must have been considerable of a business point before the war. There are quite a number of business houses, and they are generally put up in good style. But the greater number of them are closed now, and but little is done by those who are keeping open. This evening, Dr. Davis and Hannibal Gray arrived at camp on a visit to the boys, and they generally met with very cordial reception. October 23. This morning, the company officers of the regiment, besides some of the messes, began to dig trenches through their tents and fix up so as to make warm for these cold mornings and evenings. But they had no sooner got them finished than the order came to strike tents and move off to Paris immediately. So after a few hasty preparations, we are off again for a 15-mile march, and that will have to be made in a half day. But I shan't leave this place with many regrets, for it is the most rabid Secesh hole that we have yet got into. After leaving town, we got upon the pike once more, and the traveling is delightful, for we are now beginning to enter one of the finest farming districts in Kentucky. The farmhouses and buildings in this part of the country are some of them splendid built in the most substantial manner in approved architectural styles. But all along the perceptible effect that engrosses the attention is the ever-present nigger. They are seen perched on mules, wood piles, outhouses, fences, in every place they can place themselves to make them conspicuous. At 7:30 p.m. we arrived at Paris, and were received with frantic joy by the inhabitants, who rushed to their doors and windows with lamps and flags and hailed us as deliverers. Such demonstrations made us in a great measure forget the fatigue of the 15-mile march that we had just completed, and think that our efforts to crush this unholy rebellion were meeting not without a sympathetic response from honest and loyal hearts that had been ground beneath the heel of the despots for so long a time. October 24th. Last night the boys of our regiment rested on the ground as sweetly as they ever did on their downy beds at home, and arose this morning sore and weary as we usually do after a fatiguing march. Today we are allowed to rest from all kinds of drill. This camp is a half-mile south of Paris and is one of the most pleasant that we have got into in Kentucky. In fact, the country round about here is the best that I ever have seen in my life. I think Ohio cannot furnish its equal. Paris is a town of about 5,000 and is the county seat of Bourbon County. There are some very fine business buildings in the place, and I suppose there must have been quite an amount of business done here before the war gave a check to everything in that town. Tomorrow we go on provost duty in town along with Company K, Captain Hamilton, and then I will get a chance to see something more of the town. Well, that concludes our talk today. We'll continue next time. Thank you so much for watching. God bless you. Take care, and I'll see you next time.